The morning sunlight streamed through the clear glass of the highest penthouse in Manhattan, reflecting off gleaming white walls and a priceless art collection. Crystal glasses were neatly arranged on the long dining table, draped in pristine white linen, and the silver cutlery shimmered beneath the early light. Ethan Walker, 34, the youngest white billionaire in New York's hedge fund investment world, sat at the head of the table. He wore a simple white shirt without a tie, his deep blue eyes and sharp straight nose radiating a natural charm. Behind the headlines that celebrated his billion-dollar triumphs at this moment, Ethan was simply a husband, a father, enjoying breakfast with his family. Amelia. His wife moved gracefully in a pale blue silk dress. Her face glowed with warmth, her brown eyes shining with kindness. On the table, golden pancakes, ripe red strawberries, and steaming glasses of milk were carefully arranged. Amelia preferred preparing breakfast for her husband and children without relying on chefs or housekeepers. As many might imagine, the penthouse was not cold, but filled with children's laughter. 7 kids, 5 girls and 2 boys, ages 5 to 7, chattered around the table. The eldest Adam fought to keep a toy car away from his younger brother Noah, drawing giggles from the twin sisters Sophia and Stella. The 3 younger girls, dressed in white dresses, competed to show off their messy crayon drawings, each proudly declaring herself the most beautiful princess in the family. Ethan's heart softened at the sight. He sometimes put down his financial newspaper to watch Amelia smiling with their children. In that moment, he was not a powerful billionaire, not a Wall Street symbol, but a man lucky enough to have both love and family. Yet even in this warmth, shadows lingered unseen. The press hailed Ethan as Wall Street's golden mind. One wrong decision could topple thousands of employees' futures and cost billions in profits. That weight pressed heavily on his shoulders, sometimes creating distance even in his home. Amelia often reminded him gently, "You don't need to carry the whole world, Ethan. Just being here with me and the children is enough." He would usually respond with a smile, a mixture of pride and weariness. The instincts of an investor made it hard for him to let go. His desire to give his family the very best closed his eyes to the fact that sometimes they needed his presence most. After breakfast, Ethan took the children to the rooftop garden that day. The breeze carried the faint scent of lavender as the little ones ran about, their laughter echoing through the sky. Amelia slipped her arm around her husband's shoulder and whispered, "This moment is worth more than any contract." Ethan pulled her close and kissed her hair. For that brief instant, he believed his family was untouchable, a fortress against every storm outside. But life offers no warning. Perfect happiness can be as fragile as mist vanishing with the slightest wind change. Suddenly, Ethan's phone buzzed. His assistant reported that a significant investment deal was showing cracks. Without his immediate intervention, Ethan risked losing billions and his reputation. His brow furrowed as his eyes flicked between the children playing and Amelia watching them with a smile. His heart was torn between duty and family. Yet, as always, the businessman's logic silenced the father's heart. He hurriedly kissed Amelia and the children goodbye, leaving behind the echoes of laughter and his wife's worried gaze. The sleek black car sped off into Manhattan's bustling streets. Ethan had no idea that this seemingly small choice would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. Back in the penthouse, Amelia still smiled as she watched him go, unaware that her smile would be the last memory he would carry of her for the rest of his days. Happiness can be more fragile than a single breath. And when we think we hold it in our hands, fate twists most cruelly. That afternoon, the New York sky suddenly shifted. Gray clouds rolled and wind howled through the long streets, and the first heavy raindrops fell, heralding a fierce summer storm. Amelia was driving the children home after a short outing. Inside the car, Their laughter drowned out the patter of rain on the windshield. She turned on the radio, letting a soft tune play, trying to ease the tension of the slippery road ahead. Elsewhere, Ethan was still in an emergency meeting with his partners. He glanced at his phone several times, tempted to call his wife and remind her to drive carefully. But work pulled him back, delaying him. That slight hesitation would become a lifelong regret. When night fell, Ethan's phone buzzed incessantly. On the other end came an urgent voice from the hospital. "Mr. Walker, we need you to come immediately. Your wife and children have been in a serious car accident." In that instant, Ethan's world collapsed. He couldn't even recall how he left the conference room, only that he ran straight into the rain, trembling hands dialing Amelia's number repeatedly. But it was useless. The cold mechanical voice of her voicemail was all that answered. His car sped down the highway. The wipers worked at full force, but all Ethan could see were blurred streaks of light. Every passing second stretched into eternity. When he arrived, the emergency ward blazed with harsh lights. 7 children were being tended to by nurses in the waiting room. Their clothes were soaked faces, streaked with dirt, with minor cuts on their arms and legs. But what tore at him most were their bewildered, frightened eyes. Ethan rushed to the attending doctor, his voice hoarse. "Where's Amelia? Where's my wife?" The doctor lowered his head and said quietly, "We did everything we could. I'm so sorry for your loss." The words struck like a knife to his chest. Ethan froze, his heart plunging into an abyss. Inside the stark white room, Amelia lay still. Her face was serene, her lips slightly parted as if asleep, but her cold hand no longer held his. Ethan fell to his knees, clutching her hand, his shoulders shaking. Tears soaked the sheets. "I'm sorry. If I had stayed home today, things would be different. I promised to protect you. But I broke that promise." Through the glass, 7 children stared in confusion. They didn't fully grasp death, only that the mother who hugged and kissed them each morning would never wake again. The funeral was held under a drizzle of fine rain. Hundreds of guests, partners, friends, employees came to offer condolences. But to Ethan, words were meaningless. He stood motionless by the casket, his eyes vacant. The children clutched each other's hands, tears streaming down their faces as they whispered, "Mom," a sound breaking every heart. When the coffin lid closed, Ethan felt his entire world collapse. A part of his soul was buried forever in that grave. The once laughter-filled home was empty and silent in the following days. Toys still lay scattered, unfinished drawings clung to the walls, but Amelia's gentle hands and soft voice were gone. Ethan forced himself to care for the children, but the pain was too great. He stared at the empty chair where his wife once sat at every meal. He wandered through the living room each night, searching in vain for her familiar presence. Though young, the children sensed the change. Their father no longer smiled. His eyes were shadowed, his breath heavy with the stench of alcohol. At first, it was just a glass of wine to fall asleep. But night after night, Ethan drank more, trying to drown the haunting images in his mind. Bottles of fine whiskey began piling up in his study. He neglected the company and ignored calls from the board. The media soon reported the once revered billionaire seen slumped drunk in bars, passed out on sidewalks. From an icon, he had become a disappointment in many eyes. But Ethan no longer cared. He could only feel the vast emptiness that no liquor could fill. One night, after stumbling out of a bar, he wandered down a deserted street. A sudden cold rain poured down. He had no umbrella, no shelter. He let the raindrops lash against his face. His legs trembled, then gave way on the pavement. Passers-by glanced briefly, dismissing him as just another drunk. But for Ethan, That moment was the lowest pit of his life. He buried his face in his hands, whispering through sobs, "Amelia, I can't go on. Forgive me." The street lamp glowed on his shivering, lonely figure, as though the darkness was about to swallow him whole. He didn't know that the moment he thought was the end was the beginning of something new. When one door closes, sometimes fate opens another, where light shines through the hands of the most unexpected strangers. The deserted street in the torrential downpour seemed swallowed by a vast silver curtain. Puddles reflected the dim yellow streetlights, distorted by each gust of wind. Ethan staggered forward, his head spinning, his body weighed down by alcohol. His expensive dress shirt clung to his frame, his drenched hair matted into messy strands. Every step he took onto the pavement seemed to carry the crushing weight of his grief. Then suddenly, his knees buckled. He collapsed by the roadside, breath-ragged lips trembling around a name he no longer had the strength to speak fully. The rain kept pouring, washing away the figure of a man who had once astounded the world with his strength, leaving behind only a shivering, broken silhouette. A lone figure hurried along the street, clutching a worn umbrella. Naomi had just finished her shift, walking quickly through the storm. She wanted to get home where her 3 children were waiting for dinner. But then her eyes caught sight of a body lying motionless on the sidewalk, and her steps froze. Reason told her to keep going in that moment. The man could simply be another nameless drunk. Yet instinct pushed her closer. As her raincoat shielded his drenched figure, Naomi gasped. That face. She had seen it in newspapers and on television. A once famous billionaire lies in ruin like a man with nothing to lose. Naomi knelt down and gently shook him. "Mr. Walker, can you hear me?" His dazed eyes fluttered open momentarily, meeting hers, then shut again. All he could manage was a heavy sigh. Naomi looked around. No one stopped to help. In the freezing rain, hurried footsteps passed, leaving a human being to drown in despair. Biting her lip, she hailed a taxi. With the driver's help, Naomi lifted Ethan into the car. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with the weight of knowing she was holding a life teetering on the edge. The small Brooklyn apartment lit up as Naomi opened the door. The warm aroma of chicken soup still lingered in the air. 3 children peeked out from the living room, wide-eyed with curiosity. "Mom, who's that?" the eldest asked. Naomi waved her hand gently. "Someone who needs help. Go to your rooms, let me take care of this." She settled Ethan onto the old sofa. His clothes were soaked, his face haggard. Naomi fetched a towel, wiping the rain from his hair. She changed him into a dry shirt and covered him with a thin blanket, her movements tender like caring for someone dear. In that moment, her chest tightened. Before her was no longer the glamorous man from the media, but a weary soul stripped bare, needing saving. While Ethan slept in the drunken haze, Naomi sat quietly at the kitchen table, her eyes never leaving his fragile form on the sofa. She wondered why she had brought a stranger into her home, a man who belonged to a world so far from hers. But then memories of her late husband returned. She remembered carrying him from the bed, wiping the sweat from his brow, holding his trembling hand in his final days. That loss had taught her no one deserved to be abandoned in their despair. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside the modest apartment, the golden glow of a lamp wrapped the room in a foreign and strangely familiar silence. A thin ray of light slipped through the curtains, falling across Ethan's face. He opened his eyes, the headache of a hangover throbbing faintly. Instead of his familiar penthouse, he found himself in a small, tidy, humble room. From the kitchen came the sound of children's laughter. Ethan sat up astonished to see a woman at the stove, her hands busy preparing breakfast. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the scent of toasted bread. 3 children scampered around the table, their eyes shining with delight. Ethan froze. He had believed he would never again hear the sounds of family after losing Amelia. Yet here they were, echoing before him. Naomi turned, noticing he was awake. She walked over and placed a warm glass of water before him. "You should drink this. You collapsed on the street last night. Luckily, I happened to pass by." Ethan accepted it, his gaze awkward. A man once accustomed to power and glory now found himself humbled by the kindness of a stranger. He whispered, "Thank you for not leaving me there." Naomi only smiled and replied, "Everyone stumbles sometimes. What matters is whether you choose to stand back up." The words, plain as they were, pierced through the darkness, clouding Ethan's heart like a sudden beam of light. In life, some encounters may seem like chance, but truthfully, they are written by fate to open the first page of a new chapter. Ethan sat on the old sofa, a thin blanket still draped across his legs. Morning light streamed through the small window, flooding the modest room. There are no walls covered with priceless paintings or luxurious furniture, only neatness and warmth. He heard the clink of a spoon against a pan, the aroma of fried eggs mingling with the rising steam of coffee. 3 children chattered in the kitchen, their voices filling the little apartment. Ethan suddenly felt as though he had stepped into another world. A world far removed from the life he once knew, yet strangely soothing. Naomi set breakfast on the table, a few slices of toast, butter-fried eggs and milk. The children eagerly sat down, competing to tell stories about their games at school, while she carefully portioned food for each of them. Ethan sat in silence, simply watching. This scene might seem ordinary to anyone else, but it was precious to him. It had been so long since he had felt the completeness of family life. Naomi placed a plate before him, her voice calm. "Eat. Your body needs the energy." He nodded, slightly, lifted the fork, and slowly brought each egg bite to his mouth. The richness not only eased his hunger, but also softened his heart. The 3 children studied Ethan with curious eyes. They whispered among themselves until the eldest finally asked, "Do you have kids?" The question cut like a blade against a wound not yet healed. Ethan froze, his hands stiff. The image of his 7 children at home surged into his mind. He swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Yes, and I miss them every day." For a moment, silence filled the room. Naomi looked at him, her gaze steady but without intrusion. That single glance was enough to make Ethan feel understood. Later that day, Naomi took her 3 children and Ethan to a nearby park. The trees swayed in the breeze, golden leaves carpeting the path. The children ran and laughed as they chased pigeons. Ethan strolled, eyes following the scene. He realized how long it had been since he had noticed the peace of a simple afternoon, since losing his wife. His days had been nothing but liquor and darkness. Naomi walked beside him, a paper cup of coffee in hand, and said softly, "You should let yourself breathe again. Don't let the past hold you captive forever." He lifted his gaze to the sky. For the first time, the evening clouds did not look so dark. That night, the small apartment glowed beneath the soft yellow light. Ethan read stories to the children. His voice was awkward at first, then gradually grew natural. The kids giggled, scrambling to sit closer. From the kitchen, Naomi watched quietly, her eyes lit with joy at the sight of her children's happiness. At that moment, she realized Ethan was not only a man who had once collapsed, but also a father whose heart still longed to love. Ethan closed the book, looking down at the children asleep against his shoulders. A feeling he hadn't known welled inside him, the sense of belonging to a family. After the children had gone to bed late at night, Ethan sat on the small balcony with Naomi. The city outside still glowed brightly, yet here it was peaceful. He spoke slowly, his voice heavy. "I lost everything in a single moment. I keep thinking that things would have been different if I had been there that day. This guilt, it's killing me day by day." Naomi listened quietly, never interrupting. Then, she gently placed her hand over his. The pain will never disappear. But you have the right to choose how you live on. You can't turn back the past, but you can save the present. Her words were as light as the breeze, yet they filled a hollow space inside him. The next morning, when Ethan woke and offered to help Naomi prepare breakfast, she was briefly surprised. He was clumsy, dropping slices of bread on the floor, making the children laugh aloud. But their laughter and Naomi's frown, followed by a smile, filled the room with warmth. Ethan looked at them, and a fragile light stirred within him. He didn't know the future, but at least he knew he was no longer completely lost. In the little apartment, morning sunlight poured through the window, casting its glow across the faces of those who had once been strangers. A man learning to rise from ruin, a woman with a steadfast heart, and children full of innocence. What seemed only a temporary shelter was slowly becoming a home. And deep within, Ethan realized the darkness no longer entirely consumed him, because a gentle light had begun to guide his way. Ethan knew he could no longer rely on alcohol. The headaches, the constant fatigue, and the innocent eyes of the children made him realize he had to change. But giving up drinking was never easy. Many nights cravings overwhelmed him, leaving him drenched in cold sweat. His body shook, his heart pounded. Just one small sip would ease the torment. But each time he thought of Naomi's steady gaze, he clenched his fists and told himself, "No, I can't go back." Naomi never scolded him. She stayed by his side, quietly pouring him a glass of warm water, sitting with him until the urge passed. That gentle silence was sometimes stronger than 1,000 words of advice. Instead of sinking into darkness every night, Naomi guided him into simple habits. They jogged together through the neighborhood at dawn, when the city was still asleep. His breathing was heavy in the early days, but Naomi never left him behind. She always slowed her pace, waiting for him. Afterward, they sat on a park bench, sipping hot coffee together. Slowly, Ethan realized that every morning could start with something healthier than liquor. The children became the most potent medicine. They pulled Ethan into their games, building castles from wooden blocks, chasing each other around the living room. Their laughter rang out, drowning the shadows still lingering in his mind. One day, the youngest boy clutched his hand, stammering, "Don't be sad anymore. Okay? We like it better when you smile." That innocent plea broke something open inside Ethan's heart. He realized he could still bring others joy and had reasons to live. Naomi kept the tradition of family dinners. There are no chefs or staff, just a simple soup, some vegetables, and some stew. Yet in that atmosphere, Ethan felt the connection he had long lost. He began to lend a hand washing dishes, clearing the table, even learning to cook a dish or two. Dinner was no longer a silent time filled with ghosts, but a time for sharing, for listening to laughter. Sometimes Naomi caught his gaze lingering on her, filled with gratitude and something more profound. She only smiled softly, saying nothing, though her heart trembled with a quiet stir. One late evening, Ethan approached the corner of the table where Naomi was working. In his hand, he held the last bottle of liquor hidden in his suitcase. Placing it before her, he spoke slowly. "This is what dragged me to the bottom. But today, I want to end it." Naomi didn't stop him. She waited. Ethan twisted the cap, the pungent smell rising sharply. He took a deep breath, then poured it all into the sink. The amber liquid flowed away, vanishing into the drain. Ethan felt like he had broken free from invisible chains at that moment. Naomi stepped closer, placing her hand on his shoulder. She said nothing, but her silence carried the weight of recognition. Day by day, Ethan grew healthier and more alert. The shadows faded from his face, and his eyes regained their light. He started paying attention to work again, reading financial reports, exchanging ideas with colleagues, but no longer letting it consume him entirely. More importantly, he learned to devote time to family. He took the children for walks, told them short stories, and listened to tales from their school days. Naomi observed the transformation, and a belief took root in her heart that perhaps this man was finding himself again. That day, Naomi took him and the children to the riverside. The golden afternoon sun stretched across the water, shimmering like glass. The children tossed small stones into the river, cheering as ripples spread outward. Ethan sat nearby, his body finally at ease. His voice was deep, but softened. "I never thought I'd be able to laugh again. I appreciate your patience." Naomi looked at him, her eyes glowing, but she didn't reply. With the breeze carrying the scent of grass and the sound of children's laughter, it felt like they shared a private world. That night, back at the apartment, Ethan stood before the mirror. The man staring back at him was no longer the one collapsed in a bar, but someone slowly rising to his feet. He knew the road ahead was still long, the wound in his heart not yet healed. But he also knew that he had found a light in the darkness. And that light had a name, Naomi. In days when recovery seemed impossible, Ethan had found laughter again, peace, and a glimmer of hope. His rebirth did not happen in luxury, but in a small kitchen, on a quiet street, in the simple moments shared with a resilient woman and innocent children. That light, though fragile, was enough to drive away the darkness that once consumed his life. As time passed, Ethan's presence in the small apartment became as natural as if he had always belonged there. Each afternoon, when the day's work and chores had settled, he and Naomi would sit side by the window, watching the busy street below. At first they spoke only of little things, a new movie, a childhood memory, or the children's funny stories. But slowly, the silence between them grew comfortable, and their hidden wounds began to surface within that quiet. One evening, as night fell, and the street lights cast a pale glow into the room, Ethan suddenly spoke. "I once thought I was strong, but when I lost everything, I realized I was nothing more than a weak man hiding in alcohol to forget." Naomi lowered her face, fingers tightening around her cup of hot tea. Then she shared about the days watching her husband fade away on his sickbed, powerless to save him. His death left a void in her heart that nothing could fill. They sat in silence, but it was no longer heavy. Instead, it was a silence of understanding. No words were needed. Glancing between them was enough to affirm that neither was alone in their pain. Small moments made Ethan's heart tremble. Naomi smiled gently at the children, tilted her head to tie back her hair, or sat quietly reading under the warm lamp. He unconsciously watched her, listen to the smallest sounds, and felt an unfamiliar peace within. Naomi too began to notice a change in herself. Ethan's presence was no longer a burden, but a kind of completion. He helped her fix a light bulb, carry heavy boxes, and soothe the children when they fussed. Each small gesture made her realize her heart had opened a tiny doorway. Naomi took the children to the park one weekend, and Ethan came along. The sky was clear, and sunlight stretched across the grass. The children tossed a ball and ran around the two adults. When the ball rolled too far, Ethan ran after it, then laughed with the children. Naomi stood watching from a distance, a strange feeling rising in her chest. He no longer looked like the broken man drowning in despair, but a devoted father who knew how to love and care. Her heart beat faster at that moment, something she thought she would never feel again. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Ethan and Naomi sat on the small balcony. The breeze was cool, carrying the faint scent of flowers from a nearby garden. Ethan turned, his voice low but earnest. "I know I'm not worthy yet to begin again. But every time I see you, I want to try to believe one more time." Naomi froze, her hand gripping the railing. Her heart trembled, but reason pulled her back. She feared that if she let her heart go free, she would once again face unbearable loss. She answered softly, half in refusal, half to hide her feelings. "Don't say things that make it harder, Ethan. We both carry heavy pasts and our futures. They're not so easy to merge." He stayed silent, but his gaze never wavered, filled with quiet determination. Though Naomi tried to keep her distance, daily life kept pulling them together. They cooked side by side, shared housework, and took the children to school together. One rainy day, Ethan rushed to fetch the children from school, soaked through, yet his radiant smile, as he carried the youngest in his arms, left Naomi speechless. She saw that he was not only finding himself again, but also finding a place in her life. And though she tried to deny it, she could not ignore that his presence warmed their tiny home. One night she paused when Naomi brought a coat to drape over Ethan, as he had fallen asleep on the chair. His face in slumber was peaceful, no longer marred by anguish. At that moment, she had to admit that her heart had stirred. She stepped back, scolding herself quietly. But as she turned away, the corners of her lips curved into the faintest smile. From the wounds of the past, two people who once seemed like strangers had found each other. Their feelings had not yet been spoken aloud, but they existed in every gesture, every lingering glance, every quiet moment. In that modest apartment where children's laughter blended with the rain tapping on the window, a new love was quietly blooming. Not loud, not rushed, but steady and deep, as if it had been destined all along. In recent days, their lives had flowed in a gentle rhythm. Ethan had given up alcohol completely, slowly, regaining his natural confidence. No longer drowning in shadows, he was learning to savor small joys, family meals, children's laughter, evening runs with Naomi. But with each passing day, a more profound longing stirred within him. He didn't want to stop at simply sharing a life. He wanted her to become part of his future, officially, fully. Ethan quietly prepared a plan. Not a lavish party with roses and candlelight, but a simple, heartfelt moment. He chose an evening when the children were sound asleep, and the apartment had sunk into stillness. In his hand was a small black box. Inside, a platinum ring with a sparkling diamond. To him, it was not a symbol of wealth, but a promise he wished to give Naomi a new beginning after the ruins. Naomi was sitting at the kitchen table folding small clothes. Ethan stepped forward, hesitated momentarily, then dropped to one knee before her. She froze her hands, pausing mid-motion. "Ethan, what? What are you doing?" His eyes were steady, his voice rough but full of emotion. "Naomi, you saved me from the abyss. You gave me a reason to live again, and believe my heart could still love again. I don't want to be just a temporary companion. I want to build a real family with you. Will you marry me?" The box opened the diamond, catching the warm golden glow of the lamp. The air seemed to freeze. Naomi was stunned. Her heart pounded, tears welled in her eyes. After months together, she too had felt love quietly taking root. Deep down, she wanted to shout yes, to throw her arms around him, and believe this was the miracle after so much loss. But another voice echoed in her mind. "Who are you?" "Just an ordinary widow with 3 children. "And who is he?" "A man from a world you'll never reach." Shaking, she whispered through tears, "Ethan, you don't understand. I can't. There's too much distance between us. If I say yes, everyone will say I'm using you. I don't want my children growing up under looks of contempt." Ethan froze, his hand gripping the ring box tight. He stared at her, unable to believe his ears. "You think I care about what people say? The only thing I want is you. I need someone who truly understands and loves me, not the approval of strangers." Naomi turned away, her voice trembling. "But I care. I'm not strong enough to face the world like you. I want to keep this fragile piece. I don't want it to burden me. She rose to her feet, leaving him kneeling there, clutching a ring that now felt meaningless. The once warm apartment suddenly felt suffocating. Ethan sat motionless for hours, his eyes hollow. He had never imagined that such a sincere proposal would be rejected not for lack of love, but because of an invisible wall called shame. Naomi sat alone in the bedroom, hugging a pillow tight. Her heart ached. She hadn't wanted to hurt him yet. Her fear outweighed her desire. She convinced herself that she was protecting them both from another tragedy by refusing. But why then did her tears not stop falling? In the days that followed, tension settled between them. They still cared for the children together and sat at the same table, but their eyes no longer met the way they used to. Whenever Ethan tried to speak, Naomi avoided him. Whenever Naomi looked at him, her eyes carried guilt. The silence between them grew into a wall. One evening, Ethan stepped out onto the balcony, staring at the city bathed in sunset. He remembered the moment on his knees, his trembling voice proposing, and her cold refusal, cutting like a blade. Disappointment filled him. From the kitchen, Naomi watched his back through the doorway. She longed to run to him, hold him, and confess that her heart had stirred. But her legs felt chained. She could only turn away, whispering to herself, "No, I can't let feelings overpower reason." Invisible walls had halted a budding love. Despite his sincerity, Ethan is left wounded by rejection, while Naomi is torn apart by choosing against her heart. In the small apartment, children's laughter still rang, but between the two adults, distance only grew clearer. And fate was already preparing to lead them into a new turning point, where secrets could no longer remain hidden. Naomi's heart remained heavy after the night she refused Ethan's proposal. Yet alongside the guilt, her body began to show strange signs. Every morning, waves of nausea left her unable to eat. Sometimes even the faintest scent made her stomach churn. Naomi told herself it was just stress. But as the fatigue lingered, as her hand instinctively rested on her stomach and felt something different, worry began to creep in. One afternoon, after her shift at the community health clinic, Naomi quietly stepped into an examination room. She clutched the paper results, her heart pounding. When the doctor spoke, the words rang clear. "Congratulations. You're pregnant. And not just with one. There are 6 fetuses." Naomi froze. She blinked rapidly, certain she had misheard. 6. How could that be? The doctor gently explained the rarity of her condition and urged her to be especially careful, warning that this would be a difficult, high-risk pregnancy. Naomi sat silently on the chair, tears slipping down her cheeks. It was fear and joy all at once. On the way home, Naomi placed her hand on her belly. Inside her were 6 tiny lives, growing, the result of a love she had tried to deny. Her heart was happy at the thought of seeing them born, but then worry clouded her joy. She imagined Ethan's reaction. He would never abandon her, she knew. But did she have the courage to enter his world, to face the gossip and the harsh stares? Gripping the wheel tighter, Naomi resolved, "No, I can't tell him yet. Not until I'm ready." From that day, Naomi chose loose clothing to hide her swelling belly. She avoided the curious eyes of neighbors, even questions from Ethan. Sometimes he noticed her pale face and exhaustion. Each time he asked, Naomi smiled reassuringly. "I'm fine, just a little tired." Ethan's suspicion grew, but he didn't press. He trusted that one day Naomi would tell him the truth herself. At night, Naomi lay awake, her hand resting on her stomach. Each tiny movement inside her sent her heart trembling. 6 little lives, proof of a love she had tried to push away. Tears wet her pillow. She wanted to scream with joy, yet also run from fear. She felt small against the weight of fate, never imagining she would carry such a responsibility. One afternoon, Naomi nearly collapsed from dizziness on her way home. Ethan caught her just in time, his hand gripping her shoulder with concern. "Naomi, you're not okay. Tell me what's going on." Her lips trembled, eyes glistening, ready to spill the truth. But seeing the intensity in his gaze, fear returned. She turned away, shaking her head. "I'm just overworked." Ethan didn't believe her completely, but he didn't push. Inside, the feeling that she was hiding something important grew stronger. In the days that followed, Naomi spent more time alone. She often sat on the balcony, caressing her belly and whispering, "My babies, I'm sorry. I can't tell your father yet, but I promise I'll love and protect you no matter what." Each word gave her strength, yet the guilt deepened whenever she watched Ethan tenderly caring for her 3 children. She knew he would be a wonderful father, but her insecurity stopped her from taking the step forward. As her body grew heavier, it became harder to hide. Each morning in the mirror, the changes were undeniable. The truth was surfacing, and she knew she couldn't escape forever. Deep inside, Naomi longed to lean on Ethan's shoulder, tell him everything, and share joy and fear with him. But the chains of doubt and judgment still bound her heart. Day by day, Naomi carried a secret growing within her. 6 lives forming inside her, symbols of hope and immense trial. She hadn't yet dared to confess, but fate never allows truth to remain hidden forever. And when that moment came, it would change everything: love and the lives of 2 people who had already endured too much loss. That morning, the apartment was strangely silent. When Ethan opened the door, the dining table was bare, and there was no trace of the familiar aroma of food. On its surface lay a hastily folded note, the handwriting trembling. "I'm sorry I can't stay. Please forget me." Ethan gripped the paper, his hand shaking. His heart sank, drained of all strength. He rushed through the apartment, calling Naomi's name, but only the walls answered with silence. The children were gone too, leaving the tiny home colder than ever. On the first day without Naomi, Ethan sat dazed in his apartment, the laughter, the familiar chatter all gone. Everything reminded him that she had truly left. He replayed her glances, her smiles, their peaceful moments together. Reason told him to let go, but his heart screamed, "No, I can't." At night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the window staring at the dim-lit streets, swearing to himself that he would find her again no matter what it took. Ethan activated his network of contacts, searching everywhere. He asked at clinics in neighborhoods Naomi once frequented, but every answer was vague. No one knew where she had gone. A private investigator reported seeing a woman resembling Naomi in the suburbs of Queens, accompanied by 3 children. Neighbors said she kept to herself, rarely speaking to anyone. Ethan clung to this faint lead, like a man in the desert clutching a single drop of water. Meanwhile, Naomi had rented a small apartment on the outskirts, living quietly. She tried to hide her growing belly under loose clothes. Each day she still took the children to school, still pretended life was every day, though inside her heart was torn open. She knew leaving Ethan was painful, but believed it was the only way to protect herself and the children. She feared society's judgmental stares, fearing stepping into a world that wasn't hers. At night, stroking her belly, she whispered, "My children I'll manage. We'll be okay." But even she couldn't fully believe her own words. One afternoon, Ethan appeared when Naomi went to the clinic for a prenatal checkup. He had traced her steps, finally finding the place she frequented. As the door opened, his eyes caught her familiar figure. Naomi froze, clutching her handbag tight, her heart pounding. Naomi, Ethan's voice cracked with both relief and anguish. She panicked, turned away, pulling the children with her. But Ethan wouldn't let go. He chased her through the crowded street as rain suddenly poured down, Naomi stopped in a deserted alley, her breath ragged. Ethan caught her arm, turning her around. The rain drenched them, drowning out the sound of their pounding hearts. "Why did you leave? Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan's voice broke desperate. Naomi trembled, her eyes red with tears. "Because I didn't want to be a burden. I'm just an ordinary woman with 3 children and insecurities. You have everything I could never belong to your world. You deserve someone else, not me." Ethan shook his head, gripping her shoulders firmly. "No, you're wrong. I don't need someone worthy. I need you. You are the reason I'm alive today." Naomi couldn't hold back any longer. Tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. She placed a hand on her stomach, her voice breaking. "Ethan, there's something else. I'm pregnant. Not with 1, but with 6. Ethan froze. His eyes dropped to her belly, his heart racing. Shock, disbelief, then overwhelming emotion surged through him. He fell to his knees in the pouring rain, both hands cradling her stomach, his voice trembling. "My God! 6. Naomi, you've carried this burden all alone." Naomi sobbed, nodding through her tears. Ethan lifted his gaze, his eyes shining through the downpour. "I will never let you be alone again. Whether it's 6 or 16, I'll raise them and stand with you until the very end. Stop running, Naomi. I love you, and I love these children too." Naomi's shoulders shook as she looked at him. In that moment, all her shame and fear melted in his arms. She knew she could no longer turn him away. In the storm-soaked streets of the city, 2 souls once lost to each other were finally reunited. Secrets unveiled, love confessed. No distance remained between them, for they had chosen to hold hands, defying judgment, ready to face the trials ahead. That morning, radiant sunlight bathed the vast garden where the wedding was adorned with thousands of white flowers. Soft ribbons fluttered in the breeze, and rows of chairs stood neatly arranged awaiting the guests. Ethan stood in the preparation room, staring into the mirror at a man brimming with confidence. His tailored suit fit perfectly, his bright eyes no longer clouded by the shadows of the past. He drew in a deep breath, knowing this would be the day that changed his life forever. On the other side, Naomi slipped into a pristine wedding dress. Her hair was adorned with tiny blossoms, her face glowing with tenderness and anticipation. She gently placed her hand over her belly, where the new lives within her were growing, and smiled as she thought of the future opening before them. There were no traditional bridesmaids or groomsmen. Instead, the ceremony was made extraordinary by the presence of the children. Ethan's 7 little angels, dressed in white dresses and tiny suits, scattered petals along the aisle. Naomi's 3 boys took careful wobbly steps, carrying baskets of flowers and the ring box. And finally, 3 dainty cradles draped in white lace stood before the first row. Inside, 6 newborn faces slept peacefully. The sight brought tears to the eyes of many guests. It was more than just a wedding. It was the vision of a complete family, where love had been reborn from ruin. As the music began, Naomi strolled across the green grass. Her eyes met Ethan's at the end of the aisle. They smiled at each other, their gazes brimming with trust. The minister's warm voice invited them to share their vows. Ethan clasped Naomi's hand, his words clear and steady, each syllable etched into the hearts of everyone present. "I once thought my life was over, but you came bringing me hope and love. I vow to love you, protect you, and raise all these children with you, never give up or walk away." Tears streamed down Naomi's cheeks as she answered, "I was afraid I ran, but my heart never stopped loving you. Today, I vow to stay by your side, walk with you through every storm, and build a home where no one will ever feel alone." Thunderous applause erupted across the garden, mingling with the laughter of children. Ethan bent down and kissed Naomi sweetly before everyone's eyes. In that instant, the entire garden seemed to shine brighter. The kiss was not just a declaration of love, but a proclamation to the world they had found each other and would never lose each other again. The children swarmed around them, tugging at the wedding dress and the suit jacket, making both parents laugh in unrestrained happiness. Instead of a lavish hotel banquet, Ethan and Naomi chose a warm outdoor reception. Long wooden tables overflowed with home-style dishes, roast chicken salads, cakes, and fresh juice. Guests ate and chatted in a friendly, relaxed atmosphere. The children ran and played, laughter echoing everywhere. Ethan held one of the newborns, while Naomi cradled another. The tiny cries and soft stirring of 6 babies did not disturb the guests. They filled the evening with even more warmth. The family gathered for a photograph as the sun dipped behind the trees. Ethan and Naomi sat at the center, surrounded by 16 children, from the oldest to the smallest. Every face glowed with joy, every eye shining with happiness. The photographer captured the moment, a picture not just of a wedding, but of a journey, the story of 2 people who had endured pain to rediscover the light. When the guests had gone, and only warm lanterns lit the garden, Ethan took Naomi's hand and led her to a quiet corner. Looking deeply into her eyes, his voice dropped to a tender whisper, yet full of certainty. "I lost once before, and swore never to repeat it. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for trusting me one more time." Naomi rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "It's not that I trust you. I trust us." Night fell. The house glowed with light, and children's laughter rang without end. Their wedding rings sparkled on the table, like small flames guiding them into a new chapter. Ethan and Naomi had walked through the darkness, found each other, and entered a new life of love, family, and wholeness. Happiness is not measured by how much we possess, but by who we find to share it with. And they had seen each other through storms, through sorrow, only to end in a perfect beginning.